Gavel. Good evening, everyone. I call to order the inaugural meeting of the Open Source Voting System Technical Advisory Committee of the San Francisco Elections Commission. Today is Wednesday, July 26, 2017, and the time is now 6:02 p.m. I am the chair, Chris Jordanek. Secretary Chan, can you take the roll?
President Chris Jordanek.
Here.
Larry Bufundo.
Here.
Carl Haig.
Here.
Roan Catal, is it?
Yep, here.
Roan Catal. And Tony Wasserman.
Here.
And also...
And we also have with us today Deputy City Attorney Joshua White. Okay, next item.
Introductions.
All right, okay, so since this is our first meeting, I wanted to give everyone a chance to introduce themselves. And so I'll start off. So I've been active in election reform for over 15 years. And I've been in the Elections Commission for 3 years. I'm currently the president of the Elections Commission. And I've been very active in promoting and educating people about the Open Source Voting System project. And both as a commissioner and as a member of the public. And by day, I'm a software developer. Working on a startup, and I mostly code in Python and active open source contributor. And lately, I've been contributing to a Python library called WebSockets. And yeah, so Larry?
Sure. My name is Larry. I'm a product manager at 18F. 18F is a consultancy within the federal government. It does a lot of open source work with federal agencies. Before, I've been there for about 2 years, and before that I was a consultant in the private sector and was a consultant to IDEO with a group called Digital Foundry on the Los Angeles voting system project, which is underway.
Hi, I'm Carl Haig. Since 1996, I've been the technical lead on a website called smartvoter.org, now run by the League of Women Voters, which provides election information for the public. It's free for candidates, free for the public. You can just put in your address. It gets what's on your ballot and information provided by candidates. And we work with most of the county election offices to get data. So I have a lot of experience in manipulating data from different election departments, from different election system vendors and whatnot. So I'm a consultant, and so I work on electronic CAD as well as internet applications.
I'm Roan Catal. I work for the Wikimedia Foundation, the nonprofit organization that runs Wikipedia. I've been a software engineer there for the past 8 years, and my day job that I get paid for is to write open source software, because everything that we run on, with very minor exceptions, is all open source, whether it is our own making or stuff we reuse from someone else. And prior to that, I was an open source contributor to their ecosystem for 2 years. And I am not a U.S. citizen, so I've never voted in San Francisco or in the United States, but I have voted in my home country of the Netherlands, both in person and absentee and by proxy. I think I have exercised almost all possible voting methods, which is pretty difficult to do because of how it's set up. I come with a completely different view on this, because electronic voting has basically been banned by our Supreme Court before I was even old enough to vote. So some of the practices that are used in the U.S., not here, but in some other states, are somewhat surprising, shall we say, to someone who comes from that world.
Goedemiddag. I was in Amsterdam this weekend.
Oh.
So I'm Tony Wasserman. These days I'm on the faculty at Carnegie Mellon, Silicon Valley, where we have a master's program in software management, which has a pretty strong entrepreneurial focus. So I brought what I knew from 20 years before that of doing my own startup and being part of some others. And now we're kind of teaching the next round of students about product definition and product requirements and all the usual stuff to build a solid product. As I said, I did startups for a while. I spent 6 years on the board of the Open Source Initiative, 2010 to 2016. And I guess I just know a lot of people in the open source community over the years. So,
You certainly know two of my previous bosses, I'm pretty sure.
well, I know Alvalita
Yeah, she was my boss at one point.
and Denise.
Denise, yeah.
Well, great. And also, I just want to thank everyone for taking time to be a member of this committee. And I think we bring a lot of, everyone brings a lot of experience, and I'm really hopeful for what we're going to achieve. So I'll also open it up to public comment. We're on agenda item number 2. If members of the public would like to introduce themselves. No? Okay.
Just excited to see you get started.
Okay, great.
Hello, my name is Brent Turner, and I'm here representing Alan Deckert and Brian Fox and Larry Rosen and some other folks that have pioneered the issue of open source voting in the United States. They wanted me to give you all their nod of approval, and they're looking forward to hearing what happens in this commission. We've been working since 2000 on this issue of bringing forward open source, general public license, paper ballot voting systems to the United States, and currently we have a system that is a starting point deployed in New Hampshire with good Secretary of State Bill Gardner, and we've been working with Secretary of State Padilla, and previous to him, Secretary Bowen, and different Secretaries of States from across the country to try to move the country toward more secure voting systems, and we're looking to San Francisco to set the tone and the model for the United States. So thanks for your work here.
Thank you. All right. What's the next agenda item?
Item 4, Sunshine Ordinance Overview.
Actually, ordinance number 3.
Oh, I'm sorry. General public comment. We're at number 3.
Well, that was for the comment on agenda item number 2.
Oh,
So.
sorry. I wrote that out. It
Okay.
didn't reflect the same thing. I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, so
Yeah,
we were
sorry.
just on number 2, and then
Oh,
Peter Alpers
we
is
didn't
there.
call that way. I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
he's in
So
front.
are we on the
That's
general public
unclear.
comment?
Yeah.
Okay, number 3, general public comment. Public comment on any issue within the commission, committee's general jurisdiction that is not covered by another item on this agenda. The committee.
okay. Seeing none, let's next agenda item.
Item 4, sunshine ordinance overview. Sorry.
Okay. So turn it over to Josh.
Yeah, so my name is Josh White. I'm a deputy city attorney in the city attorney's office. I advise the elections commission and a couple of other city departments. And so I wanted to just kind of, I will not be attending all the meetings. In fact, this is probably the only one that I'll be attending unless something comes up, which I don't think it will. But I just wanted to kind of give you a quick overview of the Sunshine Ordinance, which is a little bit broader than like 2 state laws that apply to public records and to open meetings. And so I guess I'll touch on a couple of things. One is the sort of like public records part of it, and then one is the sort of open meeting rules part of it. With regard to public records, documents that you create, in the course of serving on the TAC are public documents. And could be requested by members of the public through what's called a sunshine request. And so to sort of address that, one kind of thought that I have, one thing for your consideration is to use a separate email address or to create a separate email address for committee business. So if you're if you want when documents are transmitted to you, when there's a meeting coming up, etc., if you wanted to create a separate email address for that, it could make it easier for you in the event that you get a sunshine request down the road. If you didn't end up doing that, then what could theoretically happen is, if months or years down the road, a member of the public files a sunshine request and asks for all documents related to your work on the committee, it could be a little bit more complicated if you had to kind of sift through and make a determination as to which emails were committee business versus which emails are personal business. So that's just sort of one thought for your consideration. So does anyone have questions about the sort of like public records part of it? If you do get a sunshine or public records request, I can sort of help out with responding to it. There are a whole kind of like litany of exemptions that exist under the law. Exemptions meaning, documents that you may not have to produce in response to a public records / sunshine request, or aspects of a document that could be redacted. I'd be happy to help you with that. So if there was sort of personal information, phone numbers, private email addresses, home, physical addresses, that's something that could be redacted. Of course, attorney-client privilege could be not just redacted; it wouldn't have to be produced at all. So if you did get a sunshine request, I'm available to sort of to communicate with you either by phone or by email or in person. Yeah.
You say documents we create. Is an email a document?
Yes.
Right. So if I send an email to Tony, then I've created a document that can be sunshined.
Yeah. So it would be emails that you create, or it would be in the course of your work for the committee. I don't know what sorts of documents, like Microsoft Word documents as well. But
right.
Yeah, and text messages as well would be text messages that are sent in your capacity as committee members. So if you're texting about committee-related business, that would be a public record, and the fact that it's created on a personal cell phone device, iPad, whatever. It could still be a public record if you're basically doing your business as a committee member. There's actually just a California Supreme Court decision on this very topic, basically saying that it's the fact that you're sort of doing the public's business that determines whether it's a public record, not the email address that you create it from, the phone you send it from, that sort of thing. So that's sort of that's the kind of public records part of it. In terms of the public meeting part of it, there are a whole set of rules that apply to how public meetings have to be conducted. I'll work with Chris on coming up with an agenda and that sort of thing. But the general idea is, and I think this is a kind of a big departure from how I assume you all kind of go about your professional lives, is business has to be conducted at public meetings, and there are sort of strict limitations on what you can do when you're not in a public meeting here. So to kind of give you some examples, public meetings, the definition of sort of a meeting is very expansive, and so emails between a majority of this committee constitute public meetings and are therefore prohibited since they're not meetings at your regularly scheduled meeting time. And so what is prohibited, for example, is having substantive discussions by email or by text with a majority of committee members. Doing so violates the Sunshine Ordinance, and it violates the Brown Act. And so the only sorts of group emails that are permitted are for logistical purposes. So if you need to come up with a time or a location for a particular meeting, that can be done by email, but substantive discussions cannot occur by email or by text. But you can have communications, substantive communications, with less than a majority, i.e. here, 2 people. So you can have substantive communications with one other committee member, but not with 3 or 4 or 5 committee members. A sort of corollary to that idea is a prohibition on what are called, under the law, seriatim meetings. So just as I cannot, send out, or I could as the attorney to the committee, but just as a particular committee member could not send an email and have a substantive discussion with the entire group, nor could you have individual substantive communications with your committee members about the same topic, right? So the idea, the concept sort of behind that is that when the committee conducts its business, it occurs at a properly noticed, properly agendized meeting, and not having a particular committee member going about business and maybe developing a consensus or developing a strategy with each individual committee member. Another sort of corollary to that idea is, it may happen from time to time, and I don't know, but it may happen from time to time that sort of in between regularly scheduled meetings, you'll want to sort of have tasks that you undertake with one other committee member. That's okay, as long as it's not a standing group that's created. So in other words, if this committee were to create let's say a subcommittee on security, and that subcommittee on open source security were to meet at a regular date and time, that subcommittee would have to follow open meeting rules, would have to, in other words, agendize and notice its meetings, etc. But I think if there were sort of one-off projects that were created, so let's say, between this meeting and next meeting, two of you were given a task, let's say provide a report on open source security or whatever it was, because that would not be a standing subcommittee, it would be okay to kind of get together without having to do a properly agendized and noticed meeting. Does that kind of make sense?
How does the nature of collaborative working platforms like Google Docs, Drive, for one, what would be the sharing settings to store documents like that, and then if we were to collaborate asynchronously on a document virtually, does that constitute inappropriate collaboration outside of this form?
So the challenge with that sort of question, as you can imagine, is that the Sunshine Ordinance was, I think, written before the Brown Act were written before I think this sort of sharing commonly occurred. To me, creating a Google Doc that committee members had access to and that was sort of updated kind of periodically would probably constitute an ongoing meeting, and I would recommend that you not do that. I think that you could I think what you would have to do is you could task, if you had one or two committee members who are working on a particular project, they could do so and then transmit the results of that project to in the lead up time before a meeting. But I think the idea is you could not have a shared document that you're all kind of continuously collaborating on.
Even if that's publicly readable.
Yes, I think that's right.
Because in many ways that would...
Because that seems like that's...
more transparent.
This is how we all work as open source,
it's
source.
also, well, it's also more it's open to the it's a meeting and it's open to the public.
Yeah, but it's not properly agendized and there's not an opportunity for public comment. So I think that by having a Google Doc that you could sort of continuously add to and share even in a public way, I think would be an ongoing meeting, and you'd be running afoul of the notice and agenda and public comment requirements.
So
I know it's frustrating. I mean, this when we were kind of talking about what makes sense, how do we kind of harness the considerable expertise in the community. Do we have it as sort of a formal advisory committee, which is what we've done, versus just sort of an informal group of people who got together from time to time? This is one of the sort of more challenging aspects of going the advisory committee route. So I can,
So how about distributing documents that we create, if it's just distributing a document, suppose I write up a proposal or some analysis, and maybe it's on the agenda to discuss it.
You could distribute it. What you would want to say is do not reply to the email that's distributing it, and so that would be, because if there were replies, it would be those replies that sort of create the meeting. But if you create a document and
And then I
say,
just say,
here's what I did, look
Yeah.
forward to the discussion on Tuesday or Wednesday, please do not reply all.
If we saw a document written by somebody, by an external organization that was highly relevant to the topic of our meeting, what is the mechanism by which we can make that document or a link to that document available?
I think that if there was so if there was a particular article that you wanted to discuss at the meeting.
No, it wouldn't be, it would be background information. For example, here's how they're doing it in New Hampshire, or here's how France does open source voting, or something like that. Not,
It would go in the public binder, but I think that you just want to be wary of, like, let's say if you discover an interesting article that you want your committee members to read, I suppose transmitting it and saying please do not reply all, that would be fine. You could do that. I guess the risk is that if that just becomes sort of an ongoing process where you're all emailing each other with like new articles that you found, that it just has the feeling, it sort of approaches to me the feeling of like a public meeting.
Who sets the agenda for these meetings?
Chris
Right.
will.
So
I guess that's one of the things you'll be discussing is sort of what the format is for the meetings going
right.
forward.
I ask because, like, perhaps this perhaps doesn't work at scale, but perhaps you want to discourage it at scale, but perhaps a more proper way to do it could be to say, like, hey Chris, I would like you to consider to put this in an appendix or as an agenda thing or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, usually meetings of commissions, like one of the agenda items will be items for future meetings, but there's certainly nothing that would preclude you, like if you saw an interesting article and you thought it would be worthy of the committee's discussion, to kind of email Chris and say, hey, can we have this as an agenda item, discussion of the open source developments in the Netherlands, for example, and here are a couple of articles that I think would be helpful for the committee to see. That's totally fine.
so, the same applies to, the same rules apply to telephone calls and video conferences, I assume.
Yes, you could not, it would be a meeting. I mean, if you had...
You can talk to one person,
You could talk to one person.
but you can't call everybody and say the same thing.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
One last question about email. Does the SF.gov domain have the possibility of providing email addresses so that we would have a separate email address?
I believe that our Department of Technology could do that, and if that's something you're all interested in, I'm happy to take the lead on getting that. So I believe the answer is yes, but I would want confirmation from the Department of Technology.
Because then we could just use webmail to access it, and
Sure.
that would isolate.
Sure.
And
Yeah, I'll check into that, and then if for whatever reason, I don't know if they have a policy about advisory committees, since the city has numerous advisory committees. If for whatever reason there's not a policy of allowing advisory committee members to have an email address, you could always just create like a Gmail that was like wassermantac@gmail or something
Got
like
it,
that,
yeah.
and you could use that.
Yep.
But I will send you all. I assume you have everyone's email address. Yeah, I'll send out an email once I hear back from DT.
Thank you.
Yeah. And just sort of going forward, if you have other questions, I'm always available by email, by phone call. I can just tell you my email address. I didn't bring enough business cards, but Chris also has it if for whatever reason you forget it. But it's just joshua.white, like the color, @sfgov.org.
how do you spell Joshua?
It's,
In the minutes,
J-O-S-H-U-A?
item
it's in the
number
agenda,
4.
actually.
Oh yeah, JOSHUA.
I know.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Dot white at.
SF.gov, right?
Yeah, SFGOV, all one word, .org. Yeah.
Yep.
And sometimes, as I said, like the public meetings, rules and the public records rules can be a little bit counterintuitive, and as some of you alluded to, are very different from how you conduct your professional lives. And so please.
Fortunately not. This is pretty much par for the course for me.
Oh, okay.
Well, you work with government.
You're
All right.
okay.
Can't get away from it.
Well, are there other questions that folks have for me at this point? All right. Well, I think I'm going to head out, but.
Okay. Well, would you mind waiting just around for public comment?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So yeah, I'll open up for public comment on this item. Okay, seeing none. Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Great.
All right. Thank you all for.
Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. Nice to meet you all.
Okay. Next item.
Item 5, committee goals. Discussion of committee goals and strategies for achieving these goals.
Okay, so for this item, this item is more, I wanted to kind of give a chance for people to start getting their ideas on the table and to kind of talk about how we can proceed going forward. And so you can maybe view it as like a brainstorming session, both among us and also if members of the public have ideas. But before we got into that, I kind of wanted to, and maybe it would have made more sense to have a separate item, but I just wanted to kind of provide an update of where things are today, to kind of, so that'll set us up for talking about, where do we fit in with what we're doing. So, as Brent mentioned, this is a topic that goes back to around 2005 or so, and since then there have been a lot of number of reports and resolutions that have taken place within the government of San Francisco. Back in 2011, there was a voting systems task force that came out with recommendations around open source voting. Actually, Roger was a member of that. And then in 2014, the Board of Supervisors passed a resolution supporting open source voting. And then this organization within the city called LAFCO created a report on open source voting that was coming out of that resolution. Then the Elections Commission passed a resolution back in November of 2015. And then after that, this is a year ago, the mayor and the Board of Supervisors allocated $300,000 towards the planning phase of this project. And now the way that money is being spent is the Department of Elections is in the process of hiring a staff person to assist with voting system related tasks. And then the department also issued an RFP for someone from the outside to develop a sort of a report that like assesses things like the cost and the feasibility of building an open source voting system. And that the deadline for that RFP was July 12th. So I'm not sure how long it's going to take for them to make a selection. And then the report from that RFP is due in January of next year, and which is going to, that's kind of the point at which the budget season begins for next year. And this report is going to inform whether the mayor and board are going to fund this project, and how much money and so on. And then something else to know is that the department's current contract for their current voting system expires at the end of 2018. So something else the department is going to be doing is looking into what they're going to do between the time that the current system expires and the time that the open source system is finished, assuming the city goes forward with it.
So could I ask a question
Yeah.
on that?
Oh, sure.
So what constitutes the quote existing system that's expiring? I mean, I know you have DFM, election management software, but I'm not sure what other stuff that means.
Yeah, so it's a voting system by Dominion. It consists of it's an optical scan system with central count scanners for vote by mail ballots. In the precinct, there's precinct scanners, and there's also an accessible device called the Edge machine. This system was acquired back in 2007, so it's very old, and the contract has been extended a number of times.
Is that a optical ballot scanner? The Edge machine?
No, that is a touch screen with a voter verified paper trail on the side.
Oh, this is something that's in precincts?
Yeah, this is the accessible device.
Oh, okay.
And then the ballot scanner is called the Insight.
And you said that current state is a distributed tally system where ballots are tallied in the actual precincts, not like in a central location.
Yeah, the ones, most of the ballots are tabulated in the precincts, the one that gets scanned through.
And when you say this expires in 2018, is that before or after the election?
After.
Okay,
So
yeah,
in
good.
December. Yeah. So, and we'll have a lot of more opportunities to talk about this, but this is just background. And yeah, so I mean, this is kind of is going to kind of go into our goals, but the department's going to need to figure out an interim solution once that expires. So in the short term, I think the work we do can help, inform that interim system aspect. It can help whoever's going to do the RFP for the report that's due in January, and also it can help inform the budget process next year, which starts in January, February, which involves many more people in government, in the mayor's office, the board of supervisors, a group called the Committee on Information Technology. So,
Nice.
So as far as the goals of our committee, a lot of this is kind of spelled out at a high level in the bylaws, which everyone should have a copy of. And this is in the section 2. Providing technical guidance, ideas, and support to the Elections Commission on ways to improve and help ensure the success of the open source voting system project. So, and then a couple of paragraphs after that, it kind of lists a number of topic areas. So what I thought we could do during this item is just kind of brainstorm, maybe just kind of open-ended ideas that people have for kind of, ways we can do that. And I'll kind of start the discussion off, but one sort of principle I have in mind is that I think we should view the things that we do as, nothing's set in stone if we make a decision. I think we should always feel like we can go back and revisit things, improve the way we're doing things. So I don't think we should be afraid to kind of experiment with different things. And then, and one of my other thoughts is that I think that we should aim towards having some kind of a body of sort of resources and recommendations that we come up with. And it can be kind of a living document that we work on over time, and something that the public can provide feedback on, in a very easy way. So I think that could be kind of a central way that we kind of focus our work and collect feedback on. And the last thing is, I think we can also do things like invite speakers for our meetings, on certain topics. And later in the meeting, we're going to have a chance to talk about, what topics we'd like to focus on next. But so I'll just open it up to, yeah.
I think one thing that would be helpful for me as we begin to discuss ideas further and ongoing is maybe a better understanding of like this body's scope and purpose within the broader effort. And as you're laying out the current state and where things are heading and some of the unknowns, I wrote down three goals that it seems like we would be aiming at, although I'm not so sure. So it'd be good to get some clarification. So to me, it seems like we should be informing to some extent, number one, the factors that will drive the decision to fund the construction of the system, right? Two, maybe describing key parameters for the technical solution, and that could include like an analysis of key decision points, like how you make trade-offs between security and accessibility, things like that. And three, like recommendations for an approach. Like those are the things that came to my mind, not necessarily ideas or solutions, but things you would focus on as part of this group. But I'm unclear as whether or not that's beyond our mandate, and if we're just focused on something far more narrow.
I mean, in my opinion, all that stuff's fair game. I think it's fine.
With respect to the RFP that just closed and any future ones that might occur if the system does get funded, I assume, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the Elections Commission would be the one adjudicating, sort of picking the winner, so to speak.
For the system itself, or for this current RFP?
Either or both.
Well, so the commission will not be making any of the selections, and it's sort of, that's the job of the Department of Elections.
Okay.
So, and the way it works is the Director of Elections selects people to sit on a panel that
Mhm.
decides who wins these things. But the director shows up at all the commission meetings, and the commission can, in the course of meetings, the director kind of learns from commissioners what, feedback on things.
Right.
And the way that the place that our work fits in is we will be reporting to the commission. So a lot of this stuff is not something that commissioners have expertise in. So they'll be looking to this committee for they could forward on the guidance that we provide
Right.
to the director.
So we could make recommendations for the committee as to how to instruct the elections department to evaluate the proposals.
Yeah, but I mean, we could just phrase it as, we think, these are the factors that should be used.
No, I just want to get a
Yeah.
picture of the layers of indirection that exist.
Yeah.
But it's purely advisory.
No, of course we're advisory. I realize that. Yeah.
So,
It's in the name.
just to elaborate more on one of Larry's comments, I think one of the roles that we could do is kind of set some technical requirements and goals, and, so things like auditability, trackability. I have a whole bunch of lists in mind, but we can put those things down in writing, so whoever's developing this can kind of use those requirements to measure, what's going on.
So, I mean, there's this whole list of non-functional requirements, right? As opposed to the functional requirements of, hey, it shall do this, it shall do that, it shall do the other thing. But, in fact, the success or the failure is often dependent on these non-functional things like security and usability and installability and reproducibility. And somebody made a list for me once and I had 36.
It could be like that, yeah. I mean, personally, I think it should be a data-driven thing where you define data and a data format and define the different pieces and how it goes from one to the other. And then each piece to go from one piece of data to the other piece of data. Maybe it's from what's on the ballot to preparing a database that goes into the voting tabulation machine or whatever. But each piece of data then could be audited, tracked with revision control, but it needs other things like it has to be observable. So, and then things like maybe you want to minimize the amount of software, the total lines of code. So it might be better to write some small, simple routine rather than having some huge library that has huge other libraries behind it all, just to make it easier to audit. And then you can also separate out what things are critical, like vote counting is a critical operation, whereas maybe preparing the data, that could be audited and with cross-checks. So those are just sort of a general idea
Yeah,
of
I think-
what we can do.
I think all this stuff.
This issue of lines of code written versus lines of code used is an interesting one. In proprietary software, you have you have a library or a component. It's a black box. You don't know what's going on in there. But when we have all this open source code, we may the person building the system may say, okay, well, we're going to use MariaDB, let's say.
Right.
Which
that somebody might actually say that. And
that's a lot of code.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to audit it.
Yeah, but you're going to need somebody's database management system, perhaps, and it might be, Cloudera or Mongo or some, really substantial. So this issue of how do you, so I'm not quite sure how we're going to handle this idea of auditing the code when the person developing it relies heavily on existing components, because that way they can keep the development cost down by using proven stuff. So
Well,
it'd be an
that's
interesting
also
discussion.
where you can distinguish between software that just transforms one piece of data versus a critical operation like ballot counting.
In my former capacity before joining UTEP, did something very similar to what you're describing, I think, with the Los Angeles County project, where we created a document, software solutions design document, that more or less was the reference architecture to be implemented, provided guidance around how someone who were to implement the system would go about that. But I would just maybe recommend or encourage us to, it seems like we were driving towards some kind of document like that ultimately, but to not over-prescribe a potential solution, right? And that's why I mentioned the word parameter, which is something I tend to use a lot in my current line of work, which is more about, like, you know, guidance and not necessarily
I
firm
would agree,
requirements.
because some of my hair started standing up when you said the
Except for
reference
when-
implementation thing.
Except for
Reference
when there
implementation.
there are hard constraints. There's a lot of legal things that should be NFRs, and we can get them from existing codes, right, and regulations, and those will be hard constraints. But
So you can also abuse databases. So, like, we get data from Los Angeles, and we have a hard time getting data because they use the SQL database. It takes overnight for them to export their database. But my software that reads it can reprocess it, remanipulate, rederive everything. Only takes less than 1 minute. I don't use a database. So.
Yeah, what I would suggest is, you know, think about how to articulate things like this, you know, in a form that, you know, the department would be able to understand and things like that. I think in terms of what, there are going to be lots of topic areas that we're going to want to cover, and I think it might help also to, maybe we can start out thinking higher level and also focus in on the things that are, you know, most appropriate for the phase that the department's at.
So,
Yeah, that's the other thing. What do you need recommended when?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. So I have a question. Could you elaborate on just what's needed, you know, at the completion of the project, or, you know, what deliverables would have to be implemented? Is it just the, you know, the replacement for, you know, your Dominion and Edge machines, or?
Oh, it would be, it would basically replacing everything that is currently a part of the Dominion system. So that would include the central ballot scanners, the precinct ballot scanners, the accessible voting device in the precinct.
Oh, does Dominion make electronic voting machines as well?
Yeah, but they have a paper trail. On the
Yeah.
side. They do, yeah. And also all the sort of management software that ties things together, you know, that, you know, collates the vote totals from all the precinct equipment, and the software that's responsible for generating reports.
Is that Dominion software?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's all Dominion.
And is there, I'm not sure how much is available on the Dominion website. I've found a lot of these voting systems have almost nothing there, so I guess I'd like to educate myself as to, you know, what it does.
Okay, well, maybe what I could try to do for the next meeting would be to see if I can dig up some documents that kind of explain, yeah, what the
I mean, I
system's
can guess.
responsible for. Yeah.
Probably close, but it would be nice
So,
to know exactly.
I suspect that the core code is probably pretty simple, but it's all the exception handling that's going to get you. All the things that are, you know, when people vote twice in the same candidate, or when a mark on the optical ballot is not readable, or all these kinds of exceptional cases.
Oh, they might not even worry about that.
Well, I suspect they have to worry about it,
Some of
but
it.
they may not have documented it for anybody else to see.
But
Yeah.
actually, I have a question also on that. I know Santa Clara County uses machines that just, you have a crate and it dumps it and it sorts all the envelopes and collates it, then it goes and slices open the envelopes and, you know, unravels the ballots and feeds it into the scanner and all that stuff. So there's quite a lot of complex mechanical stuff. Is that part of what Dominion's stuff does?
Okay, that is not a part of the Dominion system. There is a system called, I think it's called Agilis, that the department purchased. It's basically, yeah, responsible for like sorting absentee ballots, and then I think
Is
opening
that
them.
sorting envelopes?
Well, yeah, sorting envelopes and opening them.
It also opens them.
I think so. Yeah, but I would say we don't, I mean, it's something we can think about, but
But that
it's
doesn't
more
have to be
secondary.
replaced.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be replaced.
And so this is collating them to be counted in the right precinct or whatever it is, or?
Yeah, I'm actually not even sure if the envelopes themselves need to be sorted. I think they do need to be sorted by precinct, maybe for auditing purposes.
Right. I mean, I imagine it might even vary by election, because if we have a supervisor's election versus a senatorial election, I say, then.
Yeah.
So, also on that note, the Santa Clara system, they also photographed the signature, on the outside of the envelope, and so there's I haven't actually seen, I don't know the details, but it also deals with validation of the signature on the backs of the envelopes before it's opened.
Yeah, that's a good question. So this is, kind of validating whether an absentee ballot is a valid ballot or not. I'll check on whether that's a part of the voting system or not. There's another, a related part of the voting system is, evaluating write-in, votes for write-in candidates. There's an adjudication process of, inspecting the written name on the ballot. And
Now, does somebody have to file to be,
yeah.
I believe you have to register that you want to be eligible to be a write-in.
Yeah, so I believe the Dominion system includes the software for letting staff evaluate those write-in names, but I'll double check on the signature on the absentee ballot.
So, I mean, one option might be to organize a tour for us.
Yeah.
So we could kind of see the equipment and
Good idea.
maybe ask somebody how they use it and what
That's
it
a great
does and
idea.
all that stuff.
That would be
'Cause
great.
That would,
Yeah.
and then I don't know if there's like user manuals or installation manuals or something that we can take a look at the website and see what's there,
Yeah.
but there might, if something's missing, then, because that would give us a good baseline to make sure we understand,
Yeah.
everything needed.
I know
Also,
there.
the user manual is not going to give you the same picture as talking to the person who operates the machine.
Right.
When is the last time you read your user manual for your car?
Oh, well.
Like people do things differently in practice from what the manual
Sure.
says they should do.
Another question I have is, how forward-looking we want to advise people to be. I mean, as we think about, people are, at some point it may be that people are going to vote on their mobile devices, and if we, or in some other way that they may be recognized and authorized to vote by some kind of biometric measure, whether that's a retina scan or something else, and these are things that are not in the present system, at least as far as I know. And so, do we want to, could we, for example, advise this contractor, whoever it is, that to be forward-looking, because normally, the requirements get bound pretty tightly, and if we're imagining a system that's going to last more than a few years.
Well, so I would sort of draw the line at what's current law. I think if it's something that's not even allowed under current law, then I would be a little wary of kind of anticipating that.
But I think we could hypothesize amongst ourselves, like what kind of future extensibility paths, roadmaps. So basically what you want to do is, like I said, if it was data-driven and you come up with data models to make sure that those models, could be extended or would work in sort of other scenarios. And also we need to worry not just about California election law, but
Federal election law as well.
federal election law,
Yeah.
and then,
So,
election laws in other countries, so that, it's not just U.S.
Yeah, and so to hijack your example, there's a bill in the federal House right now, which I don't see passing, but it's been introduced, that would provide that congressional districts would be consolidated in groups of 3 and use single transferable votes, for example. That would be a dramatic change in how congressional elections are conducted. But if it is more than trivial efforts to take a voting system such as the one that would be commissioned here and have it do that, then there's a problem with the voting system. Like, such things should be pluggable.
But this is a little bit of a concern about, because if I'm a contractor and you give me a set of requirements, I'm not going to do anything beyond that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, sorry, go ahead.
Right, and so if the election law is the election law, and whoever builds the system does it according to that law, it could be obsolete in a short period of time, which would not be in anybody's best interest except the contractor.
But to that point, I think it's just something that I'll try to advocate for as we go along here is to draw a real red line between defining the solution as this group's responsibility and providing guidance, and I guess I would really advocate for us producing a set of design principles that speak to things like the system must be modular and the system must be extensible in terms of its architecture and its approach, recognizing that we can't see so far into the future and recognizing that we can't account for all potential innovations that may come. But that would be a distinct approach that we would take to focus more at that principle level, right?
I'm good with that.
As opposed to a requirement level.
Yeah, and we'll have a chance to talk about these things in more detail once we actually, if we agendize something like articulating requirements of the project.
Right.
So,
Also, some things aren't necessarily requirements, but they might just be a statement that this is a good thing, and it should be taken into account.
so
It's hard to quantify some of these things.
Yeah.
When you say a system should be easy to use, I mean,
Well,
just
that's
yeah. I mean,
that's a tautology, right?
Right.
So-
Another topic. I don't know where you were going to hijack this, Chris, but.
well, I was more interested in, I wanted to kind of bring it back to like kind of the strategies we can use towards towards the goals. Like, I think having some kind of a tour, getting access to more of the information, like the manuals and things like that. Maybe inviting speakers.
Defining some discrete goals, I think, as a group is a good first step. Also.
So also, I guess one in regard to your comment, maybe open voting, maybe it starts off being like ballot counting machines, but I think it could expand to do other parts of the process, like what the DFM election management system does, or even things like candidate filings and public notices and things. So I mean, one of the hardest things we have in our project is just knowing what's on the ballot, and it's there's all these laws about public notice and whatnot, but I think that's also an opportunity for open voting.
Open
And I
formats.
mean, there's the Voter Information Project, which is sort of Google's Pew thing, but unfortunately it's kind of a Google thing that Google keeps to themselves. So, but along those lines, it's expanding, the future path of where different open source election related.
So
software
is your
can be.
idea that the path to open source voting might be phased, that different parts of the process are introduced over time, as opposed to a big bang where there's a new system?
Right, or even it's just a path, it's not necessarily a set phase, but different pieces could fall into a place, but we have an idea of how
Like
it all fits
take
together.
your example, like with the ballot stuff, it would be this is a thing where we could be forward-looking in a specific way, where we could consider, for example, and I don't want to get too much into weeds, we could consider recommending that requirement be that an open format be user developed for what the ballot is.
Right.
Which could then at some later time, be published, and other people can be encouraged to use it, whatever.
Well, I mean, I think it all fits together because,
Yeah.
An open format, let's say, for the definition of the ballot is really necessary even to count them. And so but then you have things like a list of elected offices.
Mhm.
So that could be an open format, that's also eventually necessary to prepare the piece that you need to get into that So by defining those data models and,
So-
defining some simple way to represent them and use them, then that kind of lays the groundwork, even if you don't actually use them all at the beginning.
Mm. So it sounds like we want to get back to Chris's thing, it sounds like we want to more generally write up a number of recommendations around what requirements should be functionally, not functionally, what design principles should be adhered to. I have some pet peeves around sort of more the process side of open source development things that we may want to discuss. So it sounds like there's a decent appetite here, given those are the things that we keep getting in the weeds on for making recommendations of that sort.
Yeah, and agenda item number 7, we're going to have a chance to kind of start listing out the different, topic areas that we want to
Cool.
dig into.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Chris, like as for strategies that we want to use, it does sound like we want to write up a document, something like what Larry said. Sorry, I keep having to look up people's names.
Another just practical strategy for consideration that we might look at is developing an approach for engaging subject matter experts in different areas to guide not only this body but also future work, as well as the general public, unless that's been discussed or considered already.
No, well, what are some of your ideas around that?
Well, maybe starting with identifying appropriate subject matter experts that are recognized that we could engage, and then define the method of engaging those individuals to inform recommendations that this body may put forth. And then two, I do think this is important. We heard a little bit about this morning, or this afternoon, or this evening, the briefing at the beginning of the meeting, but how we will engage the public in our work, and be transparent and solicit feedback.
I guess that feeds into your guest speaker thing too, Chris.
Yeah. Oh, in what way?
At one point you mentioned guest speakers, and I forget the context, but
Well, I was suggesting, as this is an example of what Larry's suggesting, but at these meetings we could invite subject matter experts, and but if there are other options, we could do that too.
So I have an example of how we can go beyond just what Dominion does that would make a big difference, and also maybe even meet the requirements. That's the way election results are published and posted. So part of the website is finding election results, and generally I think only one county has raw data that's actually posted to the public, but
Yeah,
I have to write a scanner that reads web pages like only intended for humans. So it's all non-transparent. There's like crazy things that have happened, the floating ballot boxes in San Francisco, or strange things that happened in Santa Barbara. But as part of building the equipment in open voting, we can also build into account in the whole process complete auditability and public accountability. And it probably also could simplify the software and make it less expensive, and also maybe serve as a model for distributing election returns.
That's all.
It turns out the Secretary of State collects all the raw data for a statewide election.
I should hope so.
So, well, the output of the ballot counting machine creates a file. Then the Secretary of State, you feed it into a system supplied by the Secretary of State. They read it, extract out the public offices, and then throw it away. So there's no computer readable election result data, and there's like 200 people, I think, on the email list for the Secretary of State's election website. All of those people have to go individually making deals with each county who distribute their results in a different format.
We'll get a chance to talk about. I do want to kind of stick to the more higher level, just the goals and strategies for this item. But why don't we open it up to the public to speak on this item? Is there any comment on agenda item number 5?
I do. You go first?
It doesn't matter.
Okay. So, hi, Roger Donaldson. I'm on the Elections Commission. Also was on the Voting System Task Force, as was mentioned by Chris earlier. Anyways, just some thoughts on those discussions. Some of the things I think we also struggled with in the Voting Systems Task Force just had to do with what is the scope of the discussion, what is the objective of the commission itself. Certainly, there's been some outlines of that, but you can go down a lot of paths here. So I guess just a few things I suggest. I think you've been talking about that, but I think that one of the top things would be to actually define what the scope is and what the objective is for this group. And think about, for example, this contractor in the business case and anything that we won't have the ability to directly inject things into that. It can still be a document that is posted that can be referenced by any of those contractors. And then an approach and the priorities, I think, around different things. And I also, in terms of development approach, some of the things you're talking about, the parameters, functional, operational, as well as development, and then some principles like transparency and all those kinds of things. So maybe sort of a manifesto to approach these things, as well as identifying statutory requirements. I'd also suggest, in addition to getting a tour, there's videos that were training videos for election workers. I think that is useful. And then in terms of scope, also what is in or out of scope in terms of voting system, right? Does it include the election management system or not? Those kinds of things, right? So, because that's still an open question in my mind as to what we really should be including for the open source. And finally, I'd suggest that think about this from the standpoint also, once you put some of those parameters around it, from an election cycle standpoint and a voting cycle standpoint. So that's all the way from what needs to happen within the parameters or the boundaries of what you've defined as the scope, from the early definition of the election, as well as the plans for the election. Like, for example, one of the things they have to do is calibrate systems and test the systems before they actually go out. Are there any considerations there? And look at it through that cycle. And then the actual voting cycle, setting up the equipment, or deploying the equipment, setting up the equipment, actual use of the equipment by voters, and those kinds of things. So, anyways, just throwing out some ideas about things we approach. But I would suggest, back to the original thing, is really defining some scope to help drive and retain some focus through the process. Thanks.
Well, so this is really going to be interesting to watch how this evolves, and I have hope still, not only for this group but for the country. I'm hanging by a pretty thin thread, but I think we might be able to get this underway properly and be helpful to San Francisco. And I hope everybody realizes that there won't be, although there is a body of work that has been accomplished previous, you're not going to find help from Texas or Los Angeles or Santa Clara or anywhere. So really, you're on the cutting edge of this work in doing this. So your recommendations are really going to be important. That being said, just riffing off some of the things I've heard here so far, like with the reduction of lines of code, Kaiping Yi reduced the lines of code. And I speak from a communications layperson perspective, so at a certain point, you'll lose me, but I might be helpful at some points just because of my familiarity with the subject. So when I hear reducing lines of code, I know to spew Kaiping Yi, because he might be a resource for you, and he took the lines of code and minimized them down to a manageable situation. When we talk about database management, there's a fellow right now, he's in China, but we can have conversation via email by the name of David Weber, who's done a lot of work with the state of Virginia toward database management, and these are all open source. I think I'm using the right language when I say EML and OASIS and all these kinds of environments. I'd like to get in front of you Brian Fox, who some of you might be familiar with because he is the fellow that put forward the Bash shell, and he has demonstrated open source systems originally in 2004 and then again in 2008. So there are some people that can be helpful. So you're not recreating the wheel, or at least if you are, it's done in a way that is fine-tuning something that you might be able to utilize and save some time. So I just wanted to mention that that is going on, and at the same time, I think you're going to find that if you look toward like a Santa Clara, you can figure out maybe some things on what not to do, but I think the closer you look, if you haven't already studied this intensely, you're gonna be amazed at the mess that we're in, and how important this work is, and how you kind of have your work cut out for you in overcoming the mindset that there might be someone else here to save us, because the EAC, the highest ranking federal group, is not very knowledgeable on these issues. So you're gonna be in a position where you're gonna know more than the highest ranking federal commission, which is the EAC. When you talk about audit, I wanted to just note that we interpret audit as a word used for a botched election. I'll just be a moment here. Because even though an audit, and 100% audit, immediate at the precinct level should happen, there's no substitute for the first count being appropriate, and I know that you know that, but we see that. And then finally, to Tony's point, I'm interested to hear what the group comes up with smartphone voting and that kind of thing. There is great pushback to those sorts of ideology, so that we almost leave that out in the open source community. We want to make sure it's general public license and maybe not so much open public license. We want to make sure that it's open source and not disclosed. But when we start talking about smartphone voting and blockchain and that kind of thing, we get pushback from people that try to bring that into internet voting conversation. And so I'd be interested to hear, if you have time, what happens with your thoughts, because I think this group right here is really positioned to do some good work, and thanks for participating like you are. And I hope to bring forward, if you'll allow, some experts that may be available. Alan Deckard is known as the father of the open source voting movement. He'd be glad to share history with you, and I think that history is valuable as well, so you know what the vendors have been doing and how they've been manipulating this environment, and that may be helpful, knowing that history as well. And I think you're going to be surprised at what you see here, like others that are right now focusing on this on a national level, from the CIA to the FBI and others. They're all very surprised at what they're seeing, how we got here, and it's going to be interesting how we get this resolved. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so I thought this item was good to get a sense for some of the ideas people have and what things people care about in terms of the goals. Was there any further discussion on this before we moved on to the next item? No? Okay, next item.
Item 6, administration, discussion and possible action regarding administrative issues, including but not limited to attendance at the Elections Commission meetings by committee members, posting and soliciting feedback from the public regarding committee recommendations, the committee's meeting schedule, format, content, and timing of committee reports, and the committee's website.
Okay, so this item is mostly just sort of some administrative things that we kind of need to take care of and just touch on. One of the things that, they're mostly listed in what Secretary Chan just read, but one of the things that the bylaws require is that one of us, other than me, attend each Elections Commission meeting to be available to answer questions from the commissioners and maybe give a brief report. But and of course I'm going to be at the meetings, but is anyone interested in being that person to come to a meeting and being available? I mean, for number one, it requires you being available, but also just making a commitment. And I think what we could even do is, it doesn't have to be the same person at each time, but I think we should know in advance who can be sure to be there.
So who lives in San Francisco?
When
Everybody but me.
When do these meetings take place usually?
They take place the third Wednesday of each month at 6 p.m., so basically the week before.
Okay, the week before this meeting at
Yeah.
the same time. Excellent.
And-
Okay, I see where your scheduling comes from now.
Yeah.
Also, generally, could you, as a courtesy to us, announce to the members of this committee the commission meetings when the agenda is posted?
Sure.
Or
Could do that.
you or Secretary Chan or somebody, but because I think even aside from the responsibility that we have for one of us to attend, some of us also just may be interested in to attend as a
Sure.
member of the public.
Could do that.
Definitely.
So, okay, so,
And I would be happy to do that, but I cannot do it in August.
okay. All right, so is there anyone that can attend the August commission meeting? It's the third Wednesday. And I think what we could do is, this would take place during the commissioners,
The 17th or the 16th?
the,
It's the 19th. Oh, sorry. 16th.
Hmm.
I can't do August, I'll be on the East Coast.
I think I can do August.
Cool.
let's double check on this.
If it is that
I'm-
week, I might be able to do it.
Yeah, I'm going to the solar eclipse.
Yeah,
Mm.
same.
Me too.
So it sounds like there might not be a meeting of this commission next month then.
So it's the
It is the 16th.
Okay.
I'm back by the 23rd.
Oh, okay. I'm not.
I'm coming back not the 22nd.
Okay, so who can attend on the 16th?
I can't.
You can?
I
Or you-
can if I have to.
Oh, wait, Tony, did you say you can or you can't?
I can.
You can? Okay. So let's, are people okay with Tony doing it then?
Yep.
Okay. And then at our next meeting, we can talk about, September separately.
And is that the 23rd or is it the 30th?
23rd,
Yeah, actually,
the week after the regular commission meeting.
We meet the 4th.
yeah,
Wednesday.
actually, let's talk about that next. Okay, so,
Okay.
Tony's gonna attend the next commission meeting, and also, just so people know, the open source voting item is usually scheduled towards the beginning of the meeting, so you won't have to stick around.
Okay. So where does it meet? In 300
Room 408.
408.
or 408?
6 p.m.
I don't think I've ever been to the 4th floor of City Hall, and I've lived in San Francisco since 1972.
Okay, so, yeah, so someone mentioned our meeting schedule, and from people's emails responses, it seemed like everyone's okay with the fourth Wednesday of the month. Does that work for people?
Should.
Okay, so let's just keep sticking with that. Now, the next thing is that, one of the things the bylaws say is that we need to give a report to the commission at least, 4 times per year. And the first one is due 3 months after we were formed. And the day we were fully formed was June 2nd. That's when Carl was officially approved as a member, which means we have until September 2nd for the first report. And I'm thinking that we could just finalize what we want to do at our August meeting. We'll have a, a week or two at that point. But, obviously the first one can be very simple. I think just laying out some of the things that we talked about. But does anyone have any thoughts on how we could go about preparing that report? I mean, what?
After we got Google Docs blown out of the water.
Yeah, well, I think what this would probably wind up happening is maybe someone would volunteer to come up with something, and then they would bring it to the committee. But
Right, but there isn't. If it was going to be discussed in a committee meeting, it would have to be written prior to the August 23rd meeting.
it's true, unless it was edited at the meeting. So
Yeah, no, of course, but the initial version would have to be written prior to that.
yes, that is it.
Because we're not going to sit here and write a document from scratch and bore the hell out of the people that are watching from the public.
Yeah. So so I think what you're saying is that I think any report that we come up with would probably not cover transpired at the meeting at which we approved the report.
Well, isn't it fair to say that that first report, considering the time?
It could be just, we could just call it non-controversial and just assign someone to write it.
Yeah,
That
we
could
could
also be okay, but.
Delegate it.
But
Yeah.
for the update on the 23rd to the commission, like, isn't it
Oh,
pretty?
the update on the 16th, you mean?
Well, I'm just saying, like, by October, like, how much are we gonna have, like, beyond just, like, clarity around our scope and goals?
Yeah,
Realistically.
very little.
Okay.
Well,
Unless
so-
we, yeah.
Well, yeah, so what I want to talk more about is just if anyone has ideas around the process for us doing these reports, like maybe I could volunteer to just draft something and just bring it to the meeting, and then,
Yeah.
you know, unless someone is anxious to do it
I
themselves.
think I would prefer that you or somebody, drafts a report and that we discuss it at the meeting.
Okay.
Also because the meeting takes place, and this will continue to be the case, right? Because the reports are due every 3 months at the beginning of the month.
Yeah,
And you
Yeah.
can send it to us beforehand, so we have a chance to think
That's
about it.
right.
Think about it, exactly.
Yeah.
But for the first one, we might want to consider if we want to deviate from the pattern or not, because either it means that we write up a report in the coming weeks with very little in it, and then approve it at the next meeting, and then deliver it in the second, or we have some discussion, or well, you all, because I won't be there, have some discussion at the August meeting, and then you or someone write up a report of that and have that be the
Yeah.
first report, so.
and we could do that too, and we
So
could decide
Is the
then.
eclipse the 21st?
Yes.
10 in the morning.
In
So
Oregon.
I probably will be back by the 23rd, but not sure.
Yeah.
Okay,
The other option would be to have it on the last Wednesday.
That might help some, it won't help me either, I'm
okay.
gonna be in Canada until Labor Day, so.
so are we gonna have a quorum for the next meeting?
I have to move something, but I'll be there.
I'm okay for the 23rd.
Okay,
So is it better to do it next month on the 30th?
It would be for me, but,
I think it would be for me as well.
okay, let's,
I can still do the 23rd.
okay, who can't do the 30th?
I can't do either, so it
Okay, you
doesn't
can't do
matter.
either. Can you do the 30th, Larry?
30th is better for me.
Okay, we'll see if we can schedule something for the 30th, just this one time,
Mhm.
and then just for this 1 month, okay. And then we'll let you know by email.
Tony's okay with the 30th too?
Yeah.
Okay.
23rd is actually slightly better for me, but I can manage either one this time.
Okay. Oh, and also just, one of you just touched on this, but in general, if there's ever any materials you want to be part of the agenda packet, just, send that to me or Don. I would say at least by the Tuesday, the week before the meeting, and then we can make that a part of the packet. Okay, so another item is the committee website. And right now, the commission has its own website. It's actually, technically, it's implemented as part of the Department of Elections website that I and Secretary Chan have access to. It's a Drupal-based system. It's not very flexible. It's a little bit annoying, in my opinion, to update. But
Drupal 6, 7, or 8?
I have no idea.
Okay.
I mean, there might be a way to find just by viewing the source. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But what I was thinking we could do is, and this is something I can do before the next meeting, is I would just like to do something using like GitHub Pages, and we could just maintain it by, committing to repository, be a lot quicker, and we could kind of control the formatting a lot better. And this is something.
Gitbook? Do we use?
So you're saying write pages in, what is it, Markdown?
Yeah, it's something marked down. I mean, there's
Yeah.
different
Or
libraries.
that's the default, I
Yeah.
guess,
But
for
there's
Git.
also Gitbook now, which is,
Is that for books or for websites?
well, it's a website for creating a structured document.
Okay. Well, this would just be for our homepage essentially
Okay.
for the committee.
If we start to create a lot of content and have to, structure it.
So you use that versus Google Docs?
Well, this would be for a committee homepage. So,
Yeah.
we wouldn't want to have our homepage be a Google Doc.
Right.
So,
You know, I think it's okay to use either Get Page or to create a sub-page, or to create a, you know, a page that's linked to the election commission on the Dribble site. You just say, you
Yeah,
know,
that's right.
here we are, and then
Exactly. Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's going to be it's going to give us a lot more flexibility.
yeah.
Are there any weird things we have to do or not not run afoul of the weird laws that apply to this?
No, I would let you know if that was the case. I'm paying attention to that stuff. Like, I mean, it would only come into play if maybe 3 of us would start working on it together or something. But even then, if it's just strictly administrative stuff, it might not.
Oh, right, logistics
Yeah.
are okay, that's
But,
true.
But okay, so what I'll do is I'll stub out a page for the next meeting, and you know, at that meeting we can maybe talk about things we want to tweak. Maybe we want to add, you know, certain sections or things like that. You know, list our names and things like that. I mean, actually, one thing that's kind of ironic is that the open source voting project doesn't have a web presence yet anywhere on SFGov website. So people are always asking me, like, where's the link to the project? So it would be nice because this could kind of serve as an official page. Oh, and also something else is that we're currently set up to do have the audio for these meetings posted on YouTube, and we could even switch to video if we really wanted to. I think it.
Smile.
What? Dress up nicer, but we could always come back and revisit this stuff. The last thing that I had wanted to discuss during this item was, you know, something we touched on earlier is how do we solicit feedback from the public on what we're working on. And my idea here was to have a document, kind of like Google Docs, but it would be hosted on GitHub, and it could be written as Markdown. And this would be a repository that basically houses this living document that we're working on together. And it would be, I thought it was very effective. You know, there's this federal open source policy that was hosted on GitHub, and it collected, do you know how many comments? It seemed like hundreds of comments from people around the country. They would post, and they could, you know, suggest wording and things like that. But I think it would be a very kind of interesting way for us to collect feedback from the public. And the the workflow I could see is that maybe people could issue pull requests on our document, and then at each meeting we could kind of review them and approve them or not. And then in addition, we could, you know, you could each bring snippets of text that you'd like to incorporate, and then we could discuss that, and then after the meeting it'd be just an administrative task to add that to the latest document. So, and also something that Brent mentioned is that, yeah, we're the only county in the country that is really committing to an open source project. And Travis County and LA County are both building systems, but it's not clear whether their systems will be open source. So what we come up with can be used, you know, I think across the country, what we come up with could be looked at for guidance. So,
are there resources that you could recommend for us to read up on what the state of the New Hampshire system is?
I don't have that offhand.
Okay, yeah, no, but like just at some point.
But there's a question that comes up for the contract, which is if we want somebody to build a system that's more general than just the needs of San Francisco, we have to say so and potentially pay for it, because, you know, there are undoubtedly quirks of which I'm not aware
Ranked choice event.
of, you know, that when you're
I know
doing
of some quirks, difference from California law to other states.
Yeah. I mean, you know,
But
you have
it's not that-
commonwealths and states and provinces.
But it's more like your data model for the definition of a ballot that's going to be different.
Right,
Well, like
but-
ranked choice voting is an example of something San Francisco would be considered weird to.
Right,
Yeah.
but the issue is when you put out the RFP for doing the actual implementation, is the RFP, are you gonna ask people to bid on something that's San Francisco specific, or are you gonna ask them to bid on something that is potentially more widely applicable?
Mhm.
And that's, I think, an important distinction,
Yeah,
because
well-
it'll cost more to do something more general.
Yeah, and this is something we could talk about in item number 7, like maybe a topic for recommendations.
Are we
Yeah.
maybe prematurely, and this may be a topic, dismissing the projects in Los Angeles and what Travis County is potential resources for this effort? I don't know if you've had additional conversations to this point.
Oh, no, I'm personally not dismissing them at all. I think we should collaborate if we can. But I think that my point was just that if they decide not to do open source, then we're not going to be able to use their IP, right?
Mhm.
So
or if components of the system are not open source.
yeah,
Probably most likely.
but I think I'm hopeful that they would see the incentive to be open source, and we could work together.
Have you had those discussions?
Yeah, but there are many factors in these jurisdictions. It's not just up to one person, right? And everyone has different priorities. So, okay, so back to this this website stuff. What I can do is, in addition to the committee website, I can kind of stub out like a placeholder repository for this document that we're going to work on together, and it would be just before the meeting, it would be visible, and we can kind of could be a starting point for our discussions. And it would be a draft; it won't be approved by the committee. Are there any other like administrative things that people had on their own minds to talk about? Maybe like how things will work in practice related to Josh's discussion.
What is the impact of and the mitigation, possible mitigations for having to miss meetings? Because as I said, I'm going to have to miss next month's no matter what, and I will likely have to miss the October one because of business travel. And like going back to how government is not adapted to modern technology, like I don't suppose there are video conference options, right?
Right, that's right. Yeah, so our bylaws do talk about absences, and what they say is if someone misses 2 meetings, then I need to inform the person that if they miss the 3rd meeting, I would tell the commission that.
Right. So there's consecutive or
I think it just
or
says
non-consecutive.
I think it's per year.
So video conferences that are recorded are not acceptable?
To my knowledge, it's not. Nowhere in the San Francisco government do they allow people to do remote. I mean, we could also, we could try to work around people's schedules.
Yeah.
On a month-to-month basis.
Yeah, that's also possible. In August, like I'm basically going to be away for the whole month of August except for like 4 days or something. So
Okay.
I'm just giving up on that one. But in other cases, that also might be possible.
Okay.
I point this out because I'll be like, I'll be in Canada. It's not like in October I'll be in India, and I'm unlikely to be able to attend a meeting at like 5 a.m. or something local time. But
I'm going to be in India in October too, but not during that week.
okay, well that makes our life harder.
If you're a good faith participant, and then
Yeah.
there's nothing that says if you miss a certain number you need to be removed. It's just it's just
Yeah, no, that wasn't even my direct concern.
Yeah.
It's just that also the I guess at least the audio of this meeting is recorded, so I can catch up on it.
yeah.
But also whenever you say like, oh, we'll discuss X at our next meeting, I'm like, great.
Well, again, we can always revisit stuff, and I think we
Mhm.
should be open to nothing's set in stone. But let's just maybe have it as an informal policy that we'll try to kind of work around people's schedules month to month,
Yeah.
if just to kind of.
Would you like me to send you what I know about my availability?
That'd be great. Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Are you going to open source days, or are you going to something else?
No, just a company thing.
Okay.
Okay. All right. So why don't we open it up to public comment on this item? Roger, do you have anything? Okay. Was there anything else anyone had for this? No? Okay. Then,
Item 7.
yes, next item.
Item 7, topics for future discussion. Discussion and possible action regarding topics for future discussion.
Okay. So for this item, there were kind of two purposes for it. One was so we could start thinking about how to organize our written document. You know, if we want to have sections, what would be the topics? And then the second part is, you know, what topics would we like to have, you know, for future meetings, like the next meeting. And I've got a list of a bunch of things that, you know, kind of on my mind, but I think we could kind of maybe, you know, between now and our next meeting, if people kind of have topics they want to discuss, they could be grouped in certain agenda items. And
So when would we be able to see the results of the RFPs submitted?
oh, you mean the selection or just the
Well,
applications?
I don't know, just either one.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
if they choose one, then I guess we'd like to see it, but I don't know if it's worth seeing
Oh, I
it
see.
independent of that, just to
That's a
kind
good point.
of
We
get
could-
educated on.
That's a good point. So what you're saying is, let's have an item about the result of the RFP when the results are known, or when.
Yeah, or is it secret
It's
until it's
public,
decided?
it's gotta be public.
It is. Oh,
Until it's awarded, you won't know.
right.
Wait, is this an RFP for the discovery planning phase, or?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
The
think.
contract amount is like, what, 175 grand? So it's definitely not for development of the system.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, my understanding is that is not. Nothing about those bids will be public until it's awarded. But when it's awarded, I think it's a great idea for us to kind of have an item about that. Also, but
And when is it supposed to be decided?
I haven't found out yet. I can find
Okay.
out.
Conceivably, we could invite somebody from the winning bidder to meet with us.
Yeah, good.
Whether that group would want to or
Yeah.
not is,
Separate matter.
Yeah, actually, one thing I know is it's sort of a weird thing, but the RFP is written so that whoever wins it doesn't actually ever have to come in. It's just by email.
are we able to set up a video conference with such a person? Or with such a representative,
agree-
they don't
if
have
they're
to
open to
physically
it.
show up?
Yeah, that's a great question. Are we allowed to, is a member of the public allowed to be by video?
I think so.
Right.
I think so.
Or an invited speaker in general, because, you know, another thing we might consider doing is depending on, and I have no knowledge about this, so this may not be feasible or this may not be wise, but depending on what the state of things in New Hampshire is, like someone knowledgeable from there might be interesting to talk to, but they would not ordinarily find themselves on the other side of the country.
Well, it's going to be 9 p.m. though, too. But-
That's it. Yeah, no, that's another issue.
Well, government employees might be an issue, but
Yeah.
yeah. Okay. Well, that's a good idea. So,
So I just, you know, added that as an example of cases where we would have a good reason to want to video conference someone in.
let's remember to check with Josh about video conferencing with presenters. So some topics that I had listed, and these don't necessarily have to be for the next meeting, and probably it's too many for the next meeting, but I'd like us to talk about at some point, there's this idea of end-to-end verifiability as a property of a voting system. That's something that can be added on to or be part of a paper ballot system. I don't really have a real good sense for, you know, how much that would add to the cost. Another thing is, this is something the commission talked about at its last meeting, but there's a law that would permit counties to go to a model code using voting centers, or is it vote centers, or?
Well, there's early vote centers.
Oh, you mean the state law that applies to LA County and a few other counties?
Yeah, so this is a model where we wouldn't have precincts anymore. We'd have fewer. You'd have you know, on the order of like 30 voting centers that would be open for 2 or 3 weeks before election day. But my point is just that this isn't a decision that affects maybe what kind of voting system we want to design.
Mm-hmm.
So it might be worth talking about. I think we should you know, talk about procurement at some point.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's some good resources online. One of them is 18F's has a good webpage about it. here's a topic that I think might be good on the earlier is you know, what sorts of things might the department want to, so I think the Department of Elections might start looking at interim systems as early as this fall to replace whatever comes after 2018. So I think we might want to have good for the department to have certain requirements in the interim contract that might make it easier to phase into an open source system. So this could be like guidance for the department as to what they should put in the contract with this interim system.
And that's probably something we want to discuss rather soon.
Yeah, yeah. So maybe the next meeting. And we can talk about things for more than one meeting. Another thing is so one of the concerns of the city pursuing this open source system is that it's, you know, this idea of a big bang. It could be a lot of money to develop a full system, but what's nice about a voting system is that it breaks up into pieces. So there could be ways of implementing it where the city just does portions at a time. You know, maybe they just only do the central scanners first, you know, integrate that, and if it works out, we can, you know, do more. But I think it might be a good project for us to kind of maybe brainstorm different like orderings of how a voting system could be phased in.
But there's also the question of how it interacts with the remaining pieces. So
Yes.
if you have continuing agreement with an existing vendor, then you're going to be in effect replacing part of what they've provided to you and have to integrate with it. So you get into this whole data models, APIs, file format kind of discussion.
And this is why I mentioned that this agreement with whoever's going to be the interim system, we want to make sure that it's allowed.
Yeah.
But
Oh yeah, like swapping pieces out is not prohibited by the.
yeah, or like it could even be like piloting things, trying things out.
But I mean, I think that almost should be one of the requirements that we suggest, is that kind of architecture that's modular. So, because, yeah, maybe one piece isn't working that well and you just want to do something different in the future, but it needs to all fit together.
Yeah, right, and it's not just that it's modular, it's that the file formats or APIs are published and public.
Right. Well, it's open source, so it should be.
Well,
No, for the interim system.
but some of the existing pieces are not open source.
Right.
They have to be willing to make their interfaces available to whoever's
And that
building
even
the
might,
open source
and that
piece.
even might be part of the project, is to convert a database from, you know, proprietary vendor into this, you know, an open source database format that fits into the architecture of this project.
Yep.
Two more topics. One was, I think we should say something about, when people talk about open source, they just mostly think of source code, but I think we could maybe have recommendation around, you know, things like the documentation should be openly licensed too, or maybe
Creative Commons.
yeah, Creative Commons. You know, things like, you know, the processes for like testing the system, or just there's sort of like things around source code we could have recommendations about.
I would love to talk about that actually also with regards to development methodology and what happens after sort of initial development.
In which mode?
Well, so the.
Go on, I didn't understand.
There's, you know, like the city is going to engage a contractor to build out the system, but the system isn't going to be thrown over the wall and remain static forever, right? Like, there might also be recommendations that we might be able to make about the maintenance and sort of continued life of the system, and sort of how it should be developed in a way that facilitates that.
Yes. So lots of questions around managing the project, integrating things.
But you're talking about the ongoing management of the community.
That's you.
And about you know, people being able to make pull requests. And
When I say methodology, that's more what I'm getting at.
And you're going to
too.
have, you know, you're going to have a set of committers who have access to the code base, and others who only get to contribute things to be reviewed for
Yeah.
possible inclusion. So
Yeah.
there's it's the whole issue of open source governance that comes in here.
Yeah, governance is perhaps a better word than methodology for.
Oh, was this primarily what you had in mind?
It is one of the things.
Okay.
So it's that, and also something that ties into that is when the contract with the initial vendor ends, or at least goes into sort of its steady maintenance states, where the system has been developed, it has been rolled out, it is active in the city, and it's sort of just there.
I see.
It is not going to remain static forever. Like the city at some certain points is going to want to make improvements to it to address things that don't work. It's going to have to deal with changing laws on the state and federal level, just over like in the longer term. And I think we should think about how that plays out and what things should be done in the development phase to not shoot ourselves in the foot later.
Okay. So this is long-term maintenance of the project?
Yeah, long-term maintenance, but also what can we recommend now?
Okay.
So that long-term maintenance doesn't become a nightmare. Or, well, now when I say now, I mean like in the next 2 or 3 years or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Now-ish.
Yeah, now on this time scale.
Okay. And then the last thing I had written down was, and this is something a member of the public has mentioned repeatedly to the commission, I think it's a great idea, is, right now there's no like written, even like a sketch of like a project plan for the project from the department, and like no one knows like when is, by what month do certain things need to be done by, so no one really knows anything concrete about, and I think we could maybe have recommendations around, what that could look like, or what sorts of artifacts should the department be coming up with for more transparency around the project. And it's kind of a project management type thing. Yeah, and you mentioned interacting with the community is a great one too. I hadn't written that down. Are there other topics that, you've been mentioning stuff, Carl, around modularity and things like that. Other ideas people have, just in general?
Well, when we put out the when the election commission puts out the requirements for development, the question that I have is how much of the total system is going to be specified in the first set of requirements, if the decision is that they're going to do one piece of it first that kind of fits in with everything else, that's a smaller piece of work, but it suggests, as you just pointed out, it suggests a sequence of follow-ons to that eventually you get to the final system where everything is open, as opposed to putting out a request where you say, we want the whole thing.
I suppose it's something that we could and probably should encourage bidders to do. This also reminds me of an adjacent issue, which is that as this committee sort of gathers existing documents or perhaps produces new documents, for example, when we take a tour and all that, about how the voting system works presently, that is also information that is of highly of relevance for people seeking to bid on the eventual project. And I don't know what the level of documentation exists for this within the elections department, but.
So what are you suggesting that?
So depending on how detailed the election department's own documentation is on the present system, and sort of what they need at a very precise level, and its processes, and its these are all things that are relevant to someone who actually sits down and develops a system, or even the outlines of it are even relevant for people who seek to bid on such a system. So to the extent that the elections department already has such things, they would probably be interesting to us. But to the extent that it doesn't or exists or is suboptimal, that is that is something that, like, if for that to be improved or come into existence, would benefit everybody.
Okay, so you're saying we should make those documents public for other people?
Probably. I mean, I would support that for a different reason, which is that I think that the people deserve to know how their elections are being run. But
there's a business reason too, which is
Yeah.
the more information that's available, the more likely you are to get more bidders.
yeah,
Yeah.
sensible and sensible bids, like
Yeah.
where because you were saying, Tony was saying, like, we should encourage bidders to propose a phased-in deployment, for example, where they can make informed proposals on which components to swap out first and how you would go about that. But you can't make an informed proposal about that unless you have access to a bunch of information about how things currently work, or you happen to be the company that developed the current system.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, I think we should aim to collect that information ourselves for starters.
So related to, I guess, a tour of the election system, one other question that I have is, I'm not sure if Dominion handles the printed ballot layouts. Like, how does that fit into the whole thing? Because,
It's-
well, I mean, you have, ballot preparation software, which I know originates in DIMS, but then there's bits and pieces, and then it gets laid out in a printed ballot. But then, what the ballot scanner has to do is says, okay, there's a result number, 1 is in this XY location,
Yeah.
2 is in this, and 1 corresponds to this name. So there's like this ID linkage. So how do you get the coordinates on the printed ballot,
Yeah, that's a great,
mapped into that? So what, whose software does that?
that's
Does
a great question.
have to be part of this, but at least it has to be, a defined data model in the open source voting. Even if we don't do it, we have to have that there, because then that piece can be added, whether it's translation from something else or a piece of software.
And
that's
that
for the
information,
project.
by the way, should be public so that it's easier for
Of
people to
course.
scan their own ballots. But yeah.
But it also has to be said, again, there's another modular break there, because you can imagine very easily multiple forms of voting input that, it might be a paper ballot, or at some future date, you might walk in there and see a screen and the placement of everything is different, or, you can imagine multiple, so isolating the external.
Well, and also I don't know
Presentation content.
I'm not sure the rules, there's state laws governing a bunch of things. Like, I know if you file for candidacy, you have to use a piece of paper that the county clerk gives you. You can't, like, print an online form, because the state law says it has to be their physical paper.
Mhm.
So things like voting centers, you can go to a voting center, but then you need to get a ballot for whatever precinct or ballot type
Mhm.
that belongs to you. And then, so do they have to print that on special paper, or is there a way to, like,
Yeah.
print something? I mean, I'm not sure what state laws
It may be
govern that sort of stuff, so that maybe is something we have to investigate or get educated on.
And to address someone mentioned different form factors. I forget if it was you, Carl, or you, Tony, but the accessible device already presents a different form factor.
Right.
Because presumably some way, somehow, the ballot is laid out on that screen. And the thing that is printed by it, I don't know if it's scanned currently or audited by a human or whatever happens to it, but the thing that is printed by it presumably does not look precisely like a hand-filled out ballot either.
Yeah, we could talk about, Larry, did you want to say something?
I was just going to say that I think there's a whole host of considerations that go along with ballot design. And I could see ballot design being a big feature of the system that's ultimately delivered, right?
Mhm.
And so it may be difficult for us to not specify, because that wouldn't be our intent, but to sort of even really get into the weeds with some of the technical considerations that would go along with the design that hasn't materialized at this point.
That we shouldn't get into the weeds, or we should?
I can see it being difficult for
Oh.
us to get into the weeds without knowing
Yeah.
what the design is, and we shouldn't prescribe and hamper the design.
But in terms, the first thing you said earlier was about principles.
Sure.
And that's certainly there are certain principles there that we want to encourage.
But we could say, for example, I think you said earlier, in terms of like data flow, the ballot design should promote traceability, right? Or like auditability, and have like a ballot ID and some things like that, right? Like we can speak to characteristics without really putting design in a box.
And also, I don't know about you, but I find that one of the best ways to jog my brain about thinking about how I would like something to be designed is look at an existing example of it and decide how I don't like it.
Yeah.
So that's also,
You
there's
could
all
look
this.
at EML and.
Well, there's all this stuff about, like, those who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it,
Right.
and that's all also true, and it's another reason why us learning about how things currently work is helpful. But I think, at least the ones of us that have expertise in the various areas will probably just be annoyed enough by certain things to encourage them from not happening again.
Yeah, okay, so it sounds like one thing we're gonna wanna have on the agenda at some point, maybe multiple, is just more understanding of our current system,
Mhm.
what are we replacing, also helping define the scope or the boundaries of the voting system, at least for the phase we're at. We could articulate that in writing. Just on one point on the standards stuff, there are groups working right now under NIST at the federal level.
Mhm.
These groups are open to the public. It's just email list where they're actually defining the schema for the selection data. I mean, Carl, you're not participating in those?
No, I kind of tried to get involved with the Voting Information Project, which is a spin-off of EML, but they're kind of closed about the whole
Well,
thing.
this is a federal group.
Yeah.
NIST, and
I think that's you're talking about the group that does EML?
No, they're doing their own. It's an XML standard. It's called they're working groups under the
Mhm.
EAC, but it's just so I guess my only point is that they're trying to hash out some of these standards right now, and anyone can join in.
So one of the things that would be interesting and valuable to me would be to learn about how the voting system is decomposed into these subsystems. Carl, you obviously have made a deep dive into this
Right.
that I have not.
Okay.
But that would be helpful to me to, going forward, so that we know what the pieces and parts are,
Mhm.
especially if there's going to be a modular implementation and rollout.
And if we do our own system, we could maybe come up with a better decomposition too. Right?
So, I guess what I'd say is we do need to kind of stick to principles, but I think you could put together something like as an example, but just as it being an example and not necessarily,
Sure.
A recommendation
Oh, yeah.
per se, but
Mhm.
just say,
So
well,
people know how to think about it.
here's the requirement is to make something like
Uh-huh.
that has these properties, and here's like an example of something that fits or whatever.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So. Okay.
Yeah, that's almost exactly what I was
I
thinking.
mean, I
for
could
example,
just
for-
spit it out probably as
Yeah,
a
but-
working document or whatever for
For example, the
discussion.
modularity thing that we
Right.
discussed earlier, I was thinking exactly along those lines of your system must be modular. For example, if the state government were to legislate a single transferable vote thing, just to name an outlandish example, then that should be easily addable to the system.
Okay. So I want to have a chance for public comment. Roger, was there anything you wanted to?
No, I think EML is certainly something that should be referenced and work with NIST and I'm pretty sure you can do remote testimony, if you will, or interviews or whatever you want to do, contributions. I think that this is important enough work that, you can get people like significant people, Ron Rivest, I'm just reading here because of EML, for example, to contribute if you had some very concise things you wanted to get from people. And so from some of these experts. So I think to try and make this as a extension or applied, an opportunity to apply a lot of these principles that are being created in theory, there should be a lot of interest in these outside groups and a lot of contribution, as long as it's well structured. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. Okay. Yeah. So as I said before, is there any other ideas for this agenda item? Topics. Okay. So as I said before, if topics occur to you, feel free to let me know by email at least the Monday, the week before the meeting, and that will give me enough time to kind of organize, group things. Because the agenda needs to be posted by the Friday before the meeting. Okay, so let's move on to the next item.
Item 8, election of vice chair. Do you want me to read the entire
You don't need to read
the process?
That's fine. So this is more of just, I wouldn't say the vice chair is a particularly powerful position. It's just more of, if I can't attend a meeting, it's just kind of agreed on someone that can lead in place of me. But yeah, I guess I'll just follow this process, but would anyone like to nominate anyone to be vice chair of this committee?
It seems like the number one requirement is availability.
Yes, I think well, sure, yeah. Well, let's
Or at least
phrase
availability
this
when he isn't
differently.
available.
Let's phrase this differently. Would anyone like to be the vice chair?
I mean, I'm happy to help in any way I can if you're not available, but again, there'll be occasions where it's
Okay.
like the next meeting
Well,
where I'm not.
if I'm not there and you're not there, we're gonna have a constitutional crisis, so
There you go.
I don't know what's gonna happen at that point.
Do we even have a quorum at that point? Like,
Right.
Well, we would, we could, 3 people. Okay, well, it sounds like Larry is at least willing to be the vice chair. So, I mean, I'll nominate Larry to be vice chair. And Larry, do you accept the nomination?
Sure.
Okay. Are there any other nominations? Okay. So, close the nomination period. Is there any public comment on this item? No? Any committee discussion? Okay, seeing none. So this is just a formality, but we're going to do a roll call vote, and everyone just has to name the person they vote for to be vice chair. Secretary Chian?
President Giordani.
Larry Bufundo?
Carl Haig.
Oh, I have to say somebody? Oh,
Yeah.
Larry.
Okay.
Rowan Cattell.
Larry?
And Tony Wasserman.
Larry Buffonda.
Larry, would you like to vote yourself? Okay.
Yeah, sure.
He has-
accepts.
Okay,
Unanimous.
unanimous.
He has 4
Larry
already.
Bufundo is our vice chair, so congratulations.
Mhm.
Okay, so I guess that concludes the meeting. The time is now 7:58 p.m. Have a wonderful evening, everyone. The meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
The next meeting will be